Welcome to Grab Lives, everybody. I am your host, John Vargas. Just to start off with our disclaimer, everything we say and do on this podcast does not reflect the views or the opinions of the City of Los Angeles Fire Department. Also, I just want to introduce this program that I'm starting called the Inside and Out program. And it's a program to help really establish, let's say, personal empowerment. And so it's about a 90-day program if you're interested in it. I'm really fascinated by the people who come do this program, and I only take around 3 people every 90 days. So I'm starting up a new 90-day program. It's very invasive, but it's about transforming your trauma. It's about uplifting your life consciously, biologically, spiritually, and getting to the root of your problems. So if you're interested, go ahead and send a direct message to the Instagram page, grablives_podcast, if you're interested. It's really great. It's somatic body healing, traumatic release from the body, and the conscious work, and also just facilitating personal growth. So secondly, I am introducing the 343 Fund program, and that program is about today's podcast episode. And so I'm really excited about teaming up with 343, their progress and traction they've had over a period of time with getting people to get sponsored, first responders to get sponsored to go to the Ambio Life Sciences program in Mexico to get Ibogaine treatments. And just the turnaround I've seen with this medicine, I am fully backing it up because of what it can do. And man, across the board, it has transformed people's lives, specifically for veterans who have kind of trailblazed this work. And so there's been a massive uprising in getting this medicine funded for in Texas. They just passed that funding, and also in Oregon, I believe they're working on it as well. So what we're seeing is just people's lives returning back to normal, basically through trauma and head injury stuff. So what Angela is she took the demise of her husband, Casey Skudin, and made this a nonprofit program to help people get the help they need, specifically first responders, because her husband was an FDNY firefighter, and she just sees a huge impact on what these people have on the community, and what the help they get is limited. So that's what this is all about. So this episode is going to be about Angela's story and just her healing journey, and about what Ibogaine does, what it can do for the body, what it can do for the brain, what it can do for the conscious mind. And it's a fascinating medicine. So if you're interested in hearing more about what Ibogaine is, where it comes from, go back to the episode prior with Corey. It's called Iboga, the Root of All Healing. I believe it's episode 43. We talk more in detail of what Iboga is and where this medicine came from and its capabilities. So please enjoy this episode. I just am really fascinated by the people who come into my life, who can come on this podcast and really spearhead what we're dealing with. And I hope that everyone who listens to this, please share it with people. Please like and subscribe Grab Lives. It really helps me. I can only do so much, but when everyone starts kind of helping the program and start helping the thread of facilitating for first responders to get the help they need, it really helps me. So please like, subscribe. I do this on the side. I mean, I work full time as a firefighter. So, this is just a project I do because I want change. And I've been through my own suffering. I've seen other people suffer, and I've had enough of it. I think there just needs to be some change, and it takes everyone together to want that change. So I love you guys. Enjoy this episode with Angela. It's a longer episode, so please just stay with it, and thank you all.
It's time for Grab Lives.
Thank you, Angela, for coming. I really appreciate you. Coming all the way from New York? Long Beach, New York, coming to Long Beach, California.
Yeah, coast to coast.
So I had started implementing kind of like a support for the 343 fund last couple episodes, and just to get people started on possibly donating to your program. So I'm very happy you came here. I'm actually really excited. So thank you so much for taking your time and so forth. And we'll get started on many things to talk about. And I don't know the whole story on how 343 started. So do you mind talking about that?
Sure. 343 started kind of a culmination between two things. My healing journey from Lyme disease and other tick-borne co-infections and environmental toxicity, including mold and heavy metals. And my just kind of Western medicine failing me and having to find other resources. And those other resources eventually led to psychedelic healing, which led to my healing and freedom from all of those diseases that I mentioned and conditions. And the death of my husband, FDNY firefighter Casey Skudin. He died at 3:43 p.m. on June 17th, 2022, in a tree fall accident that involved our entire family. And through his death and his career as a New York City firefighter, and my healing journey, I built an organization that was a support system for pre and post journey integration for first responders, for psychedelic healing journeys, for on the job traumas and treatment resistant depression and addiction, and all of the good things that we know exist within our departments that are covered up and unsupported and not even allowed to be spoken about within the walls without losing your job. So we saw the need for change, and I used my husband's life and legacy to enact that change with the 343 Fund. 343 is only the number of firefighters that died in 9/11, the New York City firefighters. It's a pretty famous number in New York, at least. But it's really just kind of a totem number for, that's just the beginning. Like, if you know anything about 9/11, you know that thousands of lives have been lost since that day from cancer and all of the stuff, the breathing issues that came post 9/11. So it's really a sediment to care of not only those 343 and their lives and dedication, but for their families and for all the people in the department after that kind of were injured in the flood of that. And that's kind of what happens when you're a firefighter. You know, you take on and compartmentalize this trauma or these environmental hazards in your body until something like cancer creeps up and takes you out. So yeah, we just want to preserve first responders' lives and their family life, at home life, as much as possible, as a consideration and a thank you for the job that they do to serve our communities.
Wait, so you said that tree falling accident? I haven't heard of that story, so I don't really understand, like,
so
what happened with that.
Yeah, we were, I had just finished healing. Like, I got sick in 2018, pre-COVID, and was going through a pretty intense battle for my life, really, and search for diagnosis. I'd been misdiagnosed left and right and told I had all these things I didn't have and put on medications I didn't need, and that further complicated what was going on in my system. And I just became an expert in what was wrong with me and nothing else, and the way that my human body worked, and the concept of breaking everything down to build it back up. And that's what I did. I started bee venom therapy and combo. I know you're familiar with that. That was one of the main tools that helped free me of mold toxicity and the tick-borne illnesses. And I ended up, just getting rid of everything. And within 2 years, when I started natural medicines, and it was the least expensive therapy that I actually ran out of money, which is why I started doing natural medicine. And then I had just healed from all of that, and 2022. So it took me a little bit from trying all of the Western medicine and then finding the natural medicine. And we were on our first family vacation after healing from that. It was the first vacation that my husband planned. I, for the first time in my life, didn't give an opinion about anything that we did, which ended up being a gift after he passed away, because then I had no residual guilt for having chosen any of the activities that that ended up, being the activities that met his demise, where he met his demise. But he chose everything right down to the time that we were entering this property in North Carolina. He planned a trip to Asheville, North Carolina. He graduated from college from UNC Wilmington and had never gone to like the Blue Ridge Mountains, and we were big outdoor enthusiasts. So we decided to take the family to North Carolina, and he loved history, and he wanted to go to the Biltmore Estate, and I'd never heard of it until this time. And I've still never seen the Biltmore Estate, but when we were pulling on their driveway 2 days before what would have been his 46th birthday and Father's Day, it would have been the same day, a tree just broke, a branch broke right when we were going under it in our car, and it fell on our Casey, myself, and our two boys, and everybody was knocked out except for myself. When you look at the vehicle, you don't know how anybody made it out, but the boys and I did. I had third person syndrome at the scene, so I was actively being guided by somebody that just wasn't there. I learned what a terrible witness I am, at least. Probably most anybody else that's going through something like that. But the version of events that I had in my head was not the version of events, because I had everything recorded. I was recording it going in because I was going to make him a reel for his birthday. And yeah, so I had this whole version of what went on post this tree falling on me, and, watching him die. He didn't die right away. So, but it was just a really pivotal moment in my life that allowed me to see first responders in a way that I'd never seen them before. Because when they came up to me, they were, trying to tell people what they tell people at the scene,
Right.
Don't give up hope, we'll take care of this. And I just looked at him and I said, don't blow smoke up my ass. My husband, this is a New York City firefighter. And when I said that, like, their whole face, their whole persona just changed. And they had to see more than I did too. I got to leave and go to the hospital with my kids. I didn't have to see what happened when the tree came off of them, but they did. And then I still get text messages, on Christmas from them. And to them, I'm that woman on the side of the road that just lost my husband. And my son is that 10-year-old boy that just lost his dad. He's not who he is today, which is almost 14, like in the junior lifeguard program, like really doing really good in school, taller than his mom now, and wearing his dad's clothes. So they don't get to see the success that comes after. They only see the tragedy in the moment. And then that's what gets compartmentalized. And there's about 4,000 tragedies that you're going to compartmentalize within your career. And I'm going to compartmentalize one or two.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's what the average person does. So somebody's got to do it, and it's first responders for us. So yeah, that was what happened with that tree fall that day. And oftentimes you have these horrible tragedies that are, they say you have to like burn it down to build it back up, like Phoenix style. So I decided to take something with my tragedy. I took Casey's full life insurance policy, $750,000, and that was my starting point for building this organization. I had gone through psychedelic therapy for my own healing, so I knew that it's not just like taking a psychedelic and then you're healed. Like that's just not how this works.
Yeah.
So I kind of just thought about what I needed that I didn't have as an individual, and then how could I provide that to others? And that's what the 343 fund turned into. So,
Wow, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. That's crazy. I literally just was talking to a friend at work. I was driving on the road, and I was telling him, I was like, "Hey, dude, I remember like 2 years ago, I was driving down this road. It was a super windy day in the ambulance, and the paramedic rig, and like a tree fell right in front of the rig and almost hit me. But I saw it happen. I saw it uproot and then fall right in front of me. It was crazy.
yeah.
No, it was a giant tree.
Yeah.
But wow, well, thank you for sharing that. And then thank you for turning it around to have some traction for like making a tragedy into something beautiful. I think that's part of this human experience, is doing that in itself.
Yeah.
You know, it's and to get out of that victim state, to do that it takes like true soul guts, you know. I don't know how else to explain that. You know, I think that's all what we're doing right now is we're realizing, well, it's like two options really. Like you can sit in your own victimhood states, or you can just turn it around. You know, and I think you turned around. You're still turning it around. You
Yeah,
know, so
like
thank you for that.
what you just said is so important, because that's the spot people just get stuck in, that no medicine can move. And it's that story, you know.
For sure.
You know, we're so programmable, and including by our own thoughts. So just the reframing of a story is, you know, what can propel somebody forward. But if somebody just loves their story and just wants to stay stuck in it, then there's not much that can happen going forward. So there's just so much personal responsibility that comes with healing. So, yeah.
So I had Lyme's, and the way I kind of was kind of told it's called it's like a base infection. So I've done a ton of Cambo, and like I still had it, you know. So on top of that, it's a precursor for like an unknown, you know, diagnosis. You go to so many doctors, they have no idea that you may have Lyme's, and so the person who was really educated on it really helped me to understand what Lyme's is. I mean, it's a really nasty infection to where you know, you're circling the drain essentially biologically, and it attacks the nervous system. You know, so it seems somewhat like an autoimmune disorder when your body's kind of attacking itself. But the way the guy explained it to me is like he was saying he works with other scientists, and what he had found was that Lyme's they don't see it anywhere else but the U.S. And they have ticks in any other country, or ticks in other countries. So he was telling me this, and he says that he keeps testing people with Lyme's, and he's like, "Why is there so much Lyme's on all these people? I haven't seen this 10 years ago when I was testing people with their blood." And his theory is like, well, you know, it seems to be like some type of biological warfare type deal. And because when he's constantly asking other scientists who are constantly checking other people's blood, he's like, they don't see it over there. So what the hell's going on here? And to me, that was, you know, my jaw dropped, because I was like, holy shit, like, is it biological warfare? I've heard of some type of other theory of that happening, you know?
Well, you know, those Americans get around, but yeah, Lyme disease is worldwide now. I don't know where your doctor's practicing, but yeah, it's all over. Like, I know people in New Zealand and all sorts of stuff, but Germany, it's seems to be it got around now, but yeah, there's a big theory. Burgdorf Borrelia, the bacteria name, comes from the name of a German Nazi scientist. And there's a book called Bitten that's nonfiction, and it hasn't been, you know, redacted or anything. And it explains exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Lyme disease is actually named for a place in Connecticut, Lyme, Connecticut, that happens to be just directly across from Plum Island. The theory, according to this book, is that post World War II, America won. So they got the Nazi scientists who are still Nazis, but they brought them to Plum Island, and you're working for America now. And they distributed this as a biological warfare against the United States via bird and on a tick, and that's how it was transmitted over to the mainland. And now the deer population has taken it to run rampant. And to be honest with you, I used to be so fearful of going in the woods, and going out in nature because of this, and for my children as well, and just doing massive amounts of chemical exposure to try to keep that from happening. And I think that's part of the warfare as well, to keep people, out of the woods. But we can't live our lives like that. There's a theory that this bacteria is just, in us now. And if you were to take a Western blot, you would find some strain of the Lyme bacteria in you. There's a few strands that are just super common. 57 is like a really common one. But unless you have this strand of these certain ones, you are not going to get a diagnosis from the CDC that you even have Lyme disease. Now, that's most likely. I hear people all the time, and I think this is such an important topic, especially like this time of the year. People will say, "Oh, I heard about a baby getting bit by a tick. A baby got bit by a tick." And what can you do if somebody gets bit by a tick? You can keep that tick. You can put it in a bag. And the easiest thing to do to know what's wrong with you is to send that tick to get tested. Whatever that tick has, you have. There's 200 and something diseases that can come from a tick. So it's not just these super common ones. Your regular testing at your doctor is not going to catch any of these. The test that they use for Lyme disease is an AIDS test. Okay. It's a serum-based test, and Lyme encases itself in biofilm. It's incredibly difficult to get a positive on a Lyme test. And even if you do get a positive, that's really not going to tell you anything about how you're getting out of the situation that you're in. So the best way is to not get in the situation. If it were me and I or my child got bit by a tick, I 100% would immediately go to the doctor and demand 6 to 8 weeks of a doxycycline protocol, and just protect my gut during that period as best as I can. And I think that's when it's really important to call in Western medicine and antibiotics, when you have a powerhouse like that can knock it out immediately. But for someone like me, I already had Lyme disease in my system for a really long time. Yeah. And then could have been the case for you as well. And I had a series of just stress factors in my life, taking Adderall, drinking alcohol, just overstressing my body with workouts and whatnot, that kind of led to the straw that broke my camel's back and sent me into being bedridden, essentially. But the doctors had no idea what was wrong with me. They told me I had fibromyalgia and that I needed back surgery and hip surgery, like reconstructive. They wouldn't cover anything regarding Lyme disease. And I spent about $150,000 out of pocket, had to actually fly to California to get take an IGeneX blood test to actually find out what was wrong with me. And then I started a pretty hardcore antibiotic protocol with a PICC line in my arm for months, and antiparasitics, and changed my whole diet, my whole lifestyle, started a meditation practice, infrared sauna, HBOT, red light therapy, quit watching television, just like really spiritually went in, started a yoga practice, ate Ayurvedically, and just had a full lifestyle change. And when people say, "What did you do to heal?" It wasn't taking, a pill and waiting for 30 days. It was a complete nervous system reset and learning about my body specifically and eating for my dosha, and just really going back to the fundamentals of Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic care. And that's what saved my life.
Yeah, I like calling it to stack your treatments. Like not one thing could kind of help one sliver of the kaleidoscope. I think that's what many people who actually do heal themselves, they don't just have one thing. This was the one thing, it's
Don't
not,
you wish?
it's not, I wish, right?
Uh,
Oh man, that lime stain's so crazy. I was just talking to Haley about like, we are just like kind of like spitballing and we're like, what's like the number one animal that kills people worldwide? And we looked it up and it was mosquitoes. And we were like, holy shit, dude, the mosquitoes. I mean, think about mosquitoes and ticks, like they're carrying blood from like multiple sources of mammals, right?
Yeah.
Us included. That's insane. But going back to like the lime stain was like, the guy would show me, he didn't do like a regular limes test. He would just read my blood, put it under the microscope, and he would show me what my cells looked like. And it looked like COVID.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Like this spike protein type deal, but it was like my own cells. And he was like, hey, like this is what it looks like. I actually had the guy here on the podcast. He's like a mad scientist. He's not a doctor.
Yeah, that's how I healed as a mad scientist.
Yeah.
I literally hired a scientist. Like, I went to every doctor I could first. You don't
Crazy.
just
Right.
You don't just find the mad scientist. And then the doctors just like couldn't get me anywhere. And then I found this scientist that knew everything there was to know about bee venom therapy.
Mm.
And he came over to my house and he taught me how to regenerate my body with using bee venom. So I'm a big fan of mad scientists of the world.
Yeah, I was just telling Haley too. I was like, yeah, because we did this thing together, and trying to get this infection out of our blood. And, I was just telling her, I was just thinking my life is like this fool's journey, just kind of like meeting, like these like wizards and like these mad scientists, like along this hero's journey's path, a healer's journey's path. Cause like, these people showed me, the truth of health. They showed me the truth of spirituality. They showed me the truth of how things operate within, the field of existence, how all things are in operation, right? Essentially. And wow, it's a crazy ride, but at the same time, like how cool it's been to fall ass backwards into meeting really amazing people and it's all this human connection that's probably the main thread of it all that I find to be so thrilling in a way, because human connection to me is spirituality. Like just to connect with each other at a heart-based level, it revitalizes just the conduit of love and prosperity and just the spirit of the self. We can go on and on about limes, but I am curious about, what were those entheogenic medicines or psychedelic medicines that kind of assisted you on that journey?
Yeah, it's so funny to your point though, is these things, these happenings, Lyme disease. I spoke about this recently when I was on Michael Cherno's podcast, Creatures of Habit, about how this is the greatest gift that I've ever been given in my life. So it was the catalyst to my awakening, and it was just probably the greatest teacher in my suffering. So without it, I wouldn't know what I know now, and I wouldn't be able to bring that knowledge to others. So I'm incredibly grateful for the suffering that got me there. But what got me out of it was, psychedelic wise, Iboga was the number one thing that helped me. It was what turned everything around for me. I was highly addicted to Adderall, and just having like severe ADHD, it was super easy for me to get Adderall whenever. And I was just really well aware that it was killing my body, but I already felt so non-productive with Lyme disease. It was like kind of the only thing that like even helped my body move. But at the same time, it was highly damaging to my body, and anybody that takes that substance and tells themselves it's not is lying to themselves. So I took the Iboga in my living room. I knew nothing about, the cardiac indicator and how dangerous this would be. But my choices were either I try this psychedelic substance in my living room with some dude from California, or I take $80,000 out of my husband's pension and go to Germany and get this fever, be put in a coma, and they'll give me a fever of 107.5 and hopefully I don't die, and hopefully it kills some of the things that I have. So that was just too unaffordable and too risky, and to the point where Iboga was less risky for me in my living room. They didn't have like the service providers, you know, the knowledge of the service providers that they have today and what we know now. So I did this journey in my living room and I saw nothing. You know, it's just, you know, I didn't have a psychedelic experience, so to speak. I threw up all night long, just probably more than I've ever vomited in my whole life. And the next day is what's traditionally called gray day. And I just talked to myself, you know, like I was just a piece of shit, basically. Like, what have you done? This is like, you've lost your mind now. Like, you're taking this way too far. Like, you need to chill. And I didn't realize, you know, I'm integrating new thought patterns, and my ego is not liking that at all, because it wants to stay the way we were, because that's more comfortable than going on to this better unknown life. So I didn't have any awareness around that when I was integrating that. And so I spent my day, you know, not productive. And then that night I went to sleep. And probably since I'm 14 years old, I haven't been able to go to sleep with a quiet mind without like taking some kind of substance, from alcohol to Ambien to Xanax to Tylenol PM, NyQuil, something, you know, so I can try to sleep. And I fell asleep and I slept for 8 hours. And I've been doing that on repeat ever since. And I have the ability to turn my mind off. And if you can't sleep, you can't heal. So that's the number one thing. I've also rectified my addictive patterns. My relationship with alcohol, I no longer abuse alcohol. It's not even something that like comes onto my radar for something that I would gravitate towards. And I come from generational alcoholics. I didn't know that had happened until my husband passed away. And I didn't get drunk. And that had been what I had watched everybody in my family do on repeat for forever. And I just didn't want that. And I was able to turn my mind off in the hospital the night he passed, when I would wake up and just say, okay, there's nothing you can do about this right now. And what you can do for yourself is you can sleep, or what you can do for yourself is you can eat. And then I was able to force feed myself through that time also, so that, you know, I didn't mentally fail. No one had to sedate me at the hospital. No one had to, you know, give me anything for anything. And that's the first time in my life that had happened. So that's the power of Iboga. These are plant substances that are made by our creator. Whoever made us made Iboga. And if people are getting free from their addictions, if they're able, I haven't seen a doctor since I sat with Iboga for a sickness. I haven't even gotten a cold. I got the sniffles in Peru one time for 36 hours, and everybody else just got blasted. And it just seems that whatever I've done to clear my system has been working for me since 2020. So yeah, I don't think I'm a special human being. I'm a human being who found out how to care for my body. And I think everybody has the ability to do that.
Crazy. So interesting how like something like Iboga can do, I mean, a jack of all trades. You know, I think we were talking about this book that I have, you know, Iboga is the root of all healing. You know, it's like a very interesting concept, how that medicine goes to the root of what's your problem, and will reveal it to you in some type of way, you know, whether it's a interconnected, woven fabrication of like your biological disorders, you know, leading to some type of trauma or some type of, you know, some foundational belief system you've catapulted your life off of, you know, so it makes us face the truth essentially. And I think what's interesting is you know, if you have rotten roots, you will have rotten fruit. So get to the root of your problems, you know. So really fascinating how I keep seeing more and more about this medicine. Like it's the studies on it have just come out, and it's a very strange substance because it's based off an alkaloid.
Yeah.
You know, like what is an alkaloid? Like the alkaloid is so like mysterious to so many scientists. You're like, what is this alkaloid? Like, how is it doing all these things? And even how some people are saying like its molecular structure is very similar to ketamine and very similar to like DMT, but it's not those things. It has its own I don't know, its own category of what it can do, but it's almost this master of what it can do. And what I always tell people like who are interested, they can talk to me about, because I'm so connected to all these different people who can help you with these medicines, is I truly believe like Iboga is a master plant. If you're not in the business of self-mastery, you have no business in meeting this plant with yourself. And that's just how I believe it, because it's not a magic bullet, what people say, right? But it will help you. I think it can be devastating for some people when they go do Iboga, because they have to face their truth, essentially, right? And it can be a good experience, or it can be a depressing experience because you've been running away from yourself for a long time. And it's just, when some people get hit with the truth, that devastation hits. You know, it's like, damn, like I talk to myself like this, man, I hate myself, you know, or I have no affliction for any type of awareness of self-love, you know. But I think across the board, I think it can help. I think veterans are paving the way for this, you know, because that shell shock trauma is really hard to kind of 360 out of, you know, and spin out of that, because I think it damages, you know, the human spirit at a very at a deep level, to where a medicine like this can actually help someone, you know.
Yeah, I feel like it really is a battle for the soul, and I feel like that's why they're called soldiers.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, on the other side of that is getting that soul back from all of that damage and trauma. But you know, we don't take that into account, that like, you know, you have SWAT officers that are doing that every day in their backyard, you know, and their wars don't end, you know. So that's why there's like such a need for this in the first responder community. And yeah, we're so grateful that the veterans paved the way, and this big movement with, you know, Brian Hubbard and the American Ibogaine Initiative, and Governor Rick Perry, and Marcus Luttrell, and just all these players that are really trying to progress this forward for us, isn't for, you know, access to these things. It's for safe medical access. You know, we've been seeing what these case studies do, particularly for regrowing white matter in the brain. You know, there's scientific evidence of that via a study done with Stanford University, where 30 out of 30 participants showed either total repair at a TBI site, or, you know, almost complete repair. So we're talking about, you know, there's a mastery of a substance that comes in the form of an alkaloid on this planet that is healing brains. And that's going to change the game for everything. It's going to change the game, not only for Lyme disease that comes with all of this neurological dysfunction, but things like Parkinson's and things like MS. I have a theory myself that I'm not entirely certain people with MS have MS. I think that maybe they just have Lyme disease, you know, but MS comes with a $30,000 a month chemotherapy-based treatment.
Yeah, that's insane.
You know, and Lyme disease, you know, doesn't come with that. You know, treatment through antiparasitics and antibiotics can be pennies on the dollar if you don't live within the sick walls of the United States pharmaceutical system. But, you know, in other countries, it's pennies on the dollar. And it's just a shame that we are such a for-profit society on our health, because I really do think that if we do get access to substances like this, we can turn not only our mental health and addiction issues around. And the government, frankly, owes that to us. What they've done with the opioid crisis and fentanyl, like they lied to us in the 90s, and people should be absolutely disgusted, and they should be demanding that they give us access and our our loved ones access to this because they destroyed our country with drugs and they knew what they were doing and they're the only ones that did. So we need to start getting mad about this. We need to stop looking at these things as these are drugs. This is an alkaloid. This is not a controlled substance. It does not belong on a Scheduled 1 controlled substance list by the very different definition that would need to land it there. And it got on there because our politicians are liars and they lied to us back then. And the ones that aren't need to rectify this for us now, and they need to help us get our lives back.
I totally agree with you. Yeah, I'm a victim of painkiller substances, but more so because of my mom. And my mom grew up, just like, oh, we go to the doctor, put all my faith and belief in what this doctor can do or say. And, she had a ton of stuff going on, which I would say it's repressed trauma and unprocessed grief for her. And she was prescribed all these things to where she ended up having to get a hysterectomy. And at an early age, I think she was maybe 32 when she had a hysterectomy. And after that, she got hooked on her Vicodin. And she got hooked on her Vicodin, and the doctor prescribed her, just gummed her up with antidepressants. And so she was basically numb. And part of my I would say my own wounds is with my mother because she was a vegetable and she was not there for me. But, I after I got older, I really saw what was really happening. It's not her fault. It was just, she was just poorly educated. So after she ended up working through her addiction with the pills, she realized, hey, these pills are actually not good for me. She tried to get off of them. And in that stage of getting off of the opioids, she relapsed and became a meth addict. And so she was living on the streets on meth for a few years, and this was a blockade of my life where I was in my early 20s and I was just out, independent. And she was suffering, so that's my core wounding with opioids and the opioid epidemic. And, I watched that series Painkiller on Netflix. Crazy, awesome series. I mean, they have that one part of the story where the guy's hurt his back and then he just slowly, creeps up on him, his addiction, and then he just ruins his life. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what happens to people. They don't even realize it until it just smacks them in the back of the head of everything's crumbled underneath their feet, and that's what I think is it's been like a silent killer. And it's not even just affecting one person, it's affecting other people. Because my mom's wounding for me had affected my addiction problems with alcohol. So you see how this thread, this domino effect had affected not just her, but it affected me in a sense where I had, a substance abuse issue. And I think until people realize how this ripple effect has just detrimented this country, I think people will start realizing, hey, yes, there is a need for the government to step up and say, this is our fault. They probably won't do that, but here's a substance that can help people, and let's do some more studies on it at least. Let's send some more funding at least to help specifically our veterans who also had issues with addiction, where they go to the VA, they get prescriptions for just Valium and more pain meds, and now they're 18 years just fully addicted to this stuff. Where you can go do one Ibogaine treatment and completely reverses your trauma, reverses your brain trauma, rewires your nervous system and everything else. You know what I mean? I think in particular with Ibogaine, I know that it targets the, they call it the mu receptor, the morphine receptors of the brain, to where it's like this reward center, and it completely revamps that area of that how you're perceiving reward. And now when you leave, you don't have this idea I need to do this substance in order to self-soothe for something. You know what I think? Which I think is really powerful. And on top of that, you get this possible journey within the self to understand why you're even addicted in the first place, which is really why the root of it is essential, to have this, because I think people want, the way they heal is sometimes we need some understanding with something in order to grasp like our own validity and our own actions in order to move forward. But if you don't have the understanding, you do things blindly, like that blind faith type deal. I think it's harder for people to have that, which, especially if you're a skeptic, of your own self, you don't trust yourself. It takes, you have to have a relationship with yourself in order to do that, and that some people are severed from the direct relationship of self, which I also think is a sickness.
Well, people just really are grasping for understanding. So if it can be someone else's anecdotal evidence rather than their own intuition progressing them forward, it just seems easier to swallow for some reason. And to your point, it shouldn't be that way, but here we are. But what you said, about the Ibogaine is so important, and we should probably let the listeners know that Ibogaine is the single alkaloid substance that comes from the Iboga plant that makes journeying with Iboga much easier because you can just swallow a few pills rather than eating a bunch of root bark. But to my, I've journeyed with both Iboga and Ibogaine, and I haven't seen a big difference other than the amount you have to ingest as far as what happens for you with that substance. It comes from a place called Gabon, Africa, from the Bawiti tribe, and I always like to give a nod to the Bawiti because without them, we wouldn't even have the technology or the limited understanding as Westerners that we do for this. But they begin using this much like the Peruvian and Brazilian cultures do with ayahuasca, and it's the taste of the medicine on the tongue at the birth of their children. So they believe in this so wholeheartedly as their sacrament that it's given to every single Bawiti child when they're born.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's
I
crazy.
think that's pretty cool. Their first indoctrination, their first initiation, I should say, is at age 7. So it's kind of badass.
Wow.
Anybody doing an Ibogaine journey that wants to complain, you just think about the 7-year-old Bawiti child that's standing and doing this for days, and you get to lay on a mat or in a hospital bed or whatever for 12 hours, and we're such complainers. But yeah, that's what they do. Women are initiated for 4 days. They're men for 3. So
that's crazy. I know like I saw this video that was filmed recently of the Grandmaster of the Bwiti tribe. I don't even know his name. I probably can't pronounce it correctly. I don't want to butcher it. But it was a really powerful explanation on what Iboga is. And the thing that really stuck with me is that he had mentioned that this is a living entity that has rescued their tribe. And when people do these master plants, there is a spirit attached to it. And that spirit has a name. Some people call it something like they call Iboga the grandfather or the godfather. And from what I understand by studying like the Bwiti traditions and things like that, is that this particular living entity with this medicine is the teacher, and you are the student. So you better listen. And I've also heard that that medicine being referenced as Dr. Iboga, because he comes in as the doctor itself to show you what can be done, and gives it it's a takes two to tango type story where here's this part that I can do for you, and then this is your part that you can do for yourself, and leaves you with the opportunity to change on your own, or else we'll see what happens from there. But I know from what hearing from people working with Iboga that the spirit of the medicine will stay with you for about 6 months to a year, and will be teaching you throughout the time. And it does require work on your end, and I think it's pretty interesting. But going back to what the what that grandmaster was saying is basically like do not bastardize this medicine like you've bastardized anything else. Give us the respect and the honor. Don't let this medicine go to waste, and do not dry it up based off your own research and for your own gain off capitalism. This is not something to capitalize. And I think when we realize that we try to capitalize on everything, we ruin stuff. We like to do that. It's a pattern that we've done for a very long time. So I think the respect and the reverence and the humility these people have with this medicine, it's a part of their culture, and to just come in and think we're just gonna make great change and step on these people and just have this like psychological armchair viewpoint on how these people believe to harmonize their life is just a tragedy. So I want people to just respect that in itself more than anything. But I think with all indigenous people, I think we're seeing that we have to go back to that. And these people are the wisdom keepers of this planet, and they actually hold much more knowledge and wisdom than we thought because of how sick we are. And I know Graham Hancock had this like, really beautiful explanation on how he went to go do ayahuasca, and then he asked, these people like, hey, why do you think people in the Western world are so sick? And the response was, why? Well, you don't see it. You've severed your relationship to spirit. You've severed your relationship to this planet and how things operate in its natural order. And I think when we bring back that insight and how we've severed ourselves and how we've generationally done that, and we are continuing this revolving door of the same lesson over and over that's been passed down from generations, how do we get out of it? So people who are driven by their soul, who are called to do something like this, they're not only healing themselves, they're healing their generation, their bloodline. And that takes a great responsibility and great courage to do that.
The road to freedom on this planet is going back to our indigenous brothers and sisters and relearning all of the knowledge that was suppressed and destroyed or attempted to be suppressed and destroyed. I've had the pleasure and the honor of working with our First Nations in Canada for this very cause, and just seeing the impact of the Western world on their culture and what we were speaking about earlier with the opioid addiction that has created such turmoil within the walls of their communities on these reservations, and the sweat lodges and their traditional methods just aren't getting it anymore, and no one's getting free, and the government's offering the methadone, and then that's just actually creating more issues further, and they're losing people to suicide. So that's what I think the movement on this planet now is for these indigenous people. And, it is by their grace that they are taking the white man along and showing us their secrets so that we can begin to heal our people too. So I'm glad that you mentioned them, and I think they should always be mentioned within the walls of ceremony. And for the Ibogaine movement, Iboga and the Bawiti people and Gabon should just always be at the forefront of everyone's mind when using these. And the more honor and that is put into the traditional method and learning about these substances, I believe more healing occurs for that person. So everyone's also open to do what they're going to do, but through the medicalization of this, my greatest fear is that the root and the indigenous and the traditions that this medicine was meant to be served in are being removed, and it won't be as powerful. One of the major things that comes with Iboga and Ibogaine is the soundtrack, the Bawiti music. And I hear so many people when they're in the medicine saying how annoying the music was. They're like, oh my God, that music, all night long. I just wanted to shut up. And no, it's nothing that you're going to put on your car radio. I mean, there's some people out there that'll be like, I listen to booty music all the time on my own, but whatever. It's not something that you'll put on at a party. But it's an intelligence that's not ours, that was given to these people, that actually furthers the healing of this medicine. And if you do Ibogaine in a hospital bed with the absence of this soundtrack, I do not think it does the repair that it can do with this soundtrack as a whole. So I hope as we move towards the medicalization of this, that is translated and preserved for us so that we can keep those traditions. So
Yeah, I think they had called it like polyrhythmic music.
whatever they want to say.
That's what they call it. That's what it's been like referred to as.
Yeah.
Because it does like something to like, there's a mind purge happening with the music. It's just like your thoughts would just ping like a ping pong table, just going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth until it drives you to insanity. And then you realize, wait, hold on a second. I do this to myself all the time.
Yeah,
So
I
it's
just
a
had
mirror.
that journey. Actually, I just had an Ibogaine journey last week, and I was in a butterfly effect, showing me this pattern, and what ended up happening was, and through my journey, there was only 5 Bwiti songs playing, and they were playing in this very specific order, and my body would react to the music. It was showing me about Hertz programming and Hertz frequencies, and like, watch, I can control your body with these sounds. That was my journey. And I would be able, and it was teaching me what the lesson was. So what was happening was, one song I would just sweat profusely, like to where I'd be like, oh my God, like I have to change my clothes. I'm so wet with sweat. And then the next song would come on and I would vomit like 3 times. So every single time. This probably happened 10 times so I've probably vomited, 30 times during this journey. Sometimes it'd be like that, you just have to just go with it. But what ended up happening was I was able to predict what was coming and then allow myself to be comfortable. So in life, like there's going to be, I know it's coming. I know the vomiting's coming. I know the sweating's coming. I know whatever the cold's coming, but I can take the blanket off before I start sweating. I can grab my puke bucket. I'm going to know, okay, I'm not putting it back down because this is going to happen 3 times. And then I can put the blanket on me before I start getting cold. So I was able to do these other things to make myself comfortable during the uncomfortable. And then as I eased into this and accepted it, it progressively lessened the severity of it and the intensity until it just stopped entirely. And that was what the Bwiti and that was what the spirit of Iboga wanted me to learn for that journey was, there's nothing I'm going to be able to do about this except prepare. So yeah, it can be a beautiful medicine. And to your point about the receptors, it resets all those addiction receptors. So flattens it all out. And not every instance is somebody unaddicted when they wake up from Ibogaine. They might need, depending on the severity and the length of time of the addiction, they might need 2 journeys back to back in order to do that. But for the most part, your physical dependency on a substance, with the exception of substances like, I know Xanax. If you're on Xanax and you've been on it for a while and you're going to go on an Ibogaine journey, you stay on it. And that one you have to, wean off kind of very, 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 very slowly, and it won't do anything to help you get off that. But for, opioids, for alcohol, nicotine's a tough one. Nicotine can be just as hard as opioids to get off of. So, but I've seen miracles happen. I had one guy that came through, active duty firefighter, he still is. And he's just one of those guys everybody loves, but he has a major drinking problem. He went to 7 inpatient rehab facilities to try to get sober and had failed at AA, failed at everything he tried. And he has been sober since his first Ibogaine journey for the first time in his life. And it's, we're probably coming up on, at least 9 months sober. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Alcohol is a big part of the culture, and I think it's a hard one because it's legal, right?
And it's socially acceptable.
Right. And it, like you can drink yourself to death, and it's so harmful. And this is coming from personal experience with my relationship with alcohol. And I think there's a lot of shame involved with it too. You don't want to admit you have a problem. I think there is I listened to a conversation that Steve-O had about his sobriety, and he said most alcoholics don't really they don't call themselves alcoholics until after they're done drinking.
It's true.
Because they don't realize that their relationship with it has been basically controlling their life, and to self-soothe, and that actually the addiction is to the substance is actually not the problem. It's the root of what the problem is needing some type of self-soothe and the inability to be safe in your skin, essentially, which is correct, and how he explains that. And so I think that socially acceptable thing, it's hard because I go to work and I tell guys I don't drink, man, it's not my thing, and it's just a very strange like interaction, I'm like, what, this guy doesn't drink, what a weird dude, like whatever, man. It's kind of like the response I get, you know what I mean? And I think I wasn't like hitting the bottle per se, but I definitely I was a very it was a subtle thing I did for myself. Like I just gave myself just enough to where I wouldn't be able to like, I don't know, I could like take away and numb myself and disassociate. But I wasn't like blacked out drunk all the time. I never really was. I do it social, and after I was done drinking, and actually Cambo is what helped me with my drinking problem. Every time I would drink, it would taste terrible to me, and then I'll be like, man, this is like, and I would feel like poison in my body when I did actually drink. I'd be like, this doesn't resonate to my system anymore. So it does like some type of like frequency exchange for these entheogenic substances that like change your vibration to everything that's not good for you is demagnetized now, even human beings. Like I watched my life completely unfold with Cambo because just toxic people just exited my life, even without me saying anything. It was just like this electromagnetic exchange that person knew they don't need to be around me anymore. And then they just left, It's a truly amazing experience when we surrender to entheogenic medicines, because they do things beyond our understanding, and we have to trust that something's happening without understanding it. I think it's really powerful. I know a lot of people have problems. We were talking about this before, is that a lot of people have problems going to do something like this because number one, I believe that people are threatened by things they don't understand. So when someone's challenged by a belief system that they've identified it with their entire life, they will be more averse to it. Like someone saying they're going to go do a psychedelic journey for healing, and someone who's very religious or they are sober. Those are the two spectrums of people that are very averse to it, And so I know with some people I've worked with Cambo, with sobriety, they hit a block with themselves after they've been sober for 3 years, whatever. And they're like, dude, I'm going to AA, and I keep having to tell myself I have a problem when like, I know I don't have a problem. I know there's something more to this, and I need to get that extra step. Like, what is that extra step? So I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about like those two things, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Thanks for throwing me in there. It's funny. I was talking to someone about AA. I'm super well versed on AA because I grew up with an alcoholic mother, and I will never forget the morning I came in and saw I went to AA on the message board in the kitchen. And by all my knowledge, my mother's been sober since that day. And I remember my mom used to tell me, no one can be sober unless they're going to AA. Well, so I had to delve in and research that, and it turns out 6 to 7%. That's it. That's their success rate, 6 to 7%. You know, it probably has a higher success rate than antidepressants, but you know, that's the success rate it's at. So I thought, wow, people are like living and dying on that hill for 6 to 7%, where I think that a lot of it is the stories that we tell ourselves. We can stay trapped. So for me, say I'm sober, I'm sitting over here, I'm going to AA, or I'm not going to AA, but I'm sober, and I feel like if I go and do something like Ibogaine or Iboga, that I am putting my sobriety at risk. Here's what I personally would tell myself. What a gift to be able to have the freedom from my addiction receptors, not only from substances, but just from my mind. If I can get the freedom of my mind's addiction, why would I deny myself that? And that's what these substances can do. The other thing I would tell myself is the government's full of shit. This has been completely mislabeled. It's not a controlled substance. It's an alkaloid by definition. And if in order for it to be on the controlled substance list, it has to be number 1 addictive. Ibogaine, Iboga is not an addictive substance. No one's waking up from Ibogaine saying, let's do that again. If they do, they're mentally ill. No, it's a difficult journey, and it's not something that you want to be on. And then the other thing is that it can't have any medical benefit to you, and we have scientifically proven that it regrows white matter in your brain. So it has massive medical benefit. So I would tell myself that. I would tell myself that I've been lied to, and that I have a chance at real freedom. As far as the religious aspect, this is a real thing. And I grew up Catholic. I understand, all of it, what goes through people's minds, and how scary it might be to have your faith potentially shaken. The only thing that I have ever witnessed, and any service provider that I have spoken to has ever witnessed, has been a renewed faith, or perhaps a found faith in our Creator, in God. I have never seen it operate the opposite. I have seen it make an atheist a believer. I have never seen it take away someone's belief in God. This is a substance made by God, and it's made for us. And the only thing that it does is bring us closer.
Yeah, I think the word iboga even means like eating God, right? Something like that.
Something like that.
It's some type of a description of how they perceive it, you know. And I think there's a documentary. I don't know if you've seen it. It's called Dosed.
Yeah.
Okay, like that. And so there's two of them that I saw. I think they might have have more stuff coming out, but
my buddy Trevor Miller's in that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's one of the founders of Ambio Life Sciences down in Tijuana, Mexico. They're our service provider for Ibogaine.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's one episode. It's a woman who is dying of cancer, and she goes through a series of psilocybin treatments, and she's like in her 50s, maybe 60s. And then the other one is a woman who's going through her addiction stuff.
She's doing really good, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow, how powerful. Both those episodes, extremely powerful. And the first one, me and Haley like broke in tears. And what she had explained was, you know, she'd been to church her entire life. And when she had her psilocybin experience, she had never felt close to God. And it was actually the most spiritual experience she's ever had outside of going to church, which is really profound. I think one of the main factors with these substances that are medicines, because I truly believe like most of what we call medicines are drugs, and most of what we call drugs are medicine, is the fact that it's disrupting this thing called the default mode network. And that default mode network is a section of the brain that we basically have created is somewhat of a simulation with how we perceive reality and how we've structured the chatter, and we've structured somewhat of the ego to emerge, and this false sense of self that is separate. And that separateness keeps us from being in this unificated state with the creation of all things. And even going back to indigenous cultures, like indigenous people believe everything has a consciousness. And not only does everything have a consciousness, but it has an intelligence to it. And that's what I'm kind of going back to what we had talked about why humanity is so sick, is that we've severed ourselves from that concept that everything has this intelligent form that we've seen as being we're a part of or separate from, when in the end we are actually not separate from it. We're actually supposed to live in harmony with everything. And these medicines can disrupt that default mode network to where the veil is lifted and you're able to see things and experience things. And when you experience those things, it's not like you're experiencing hallucinations, but this information is already there. It's just that you have now access to that information. So it's like the veil is lifted and now you can see with new eyes, actually your ancient eyes of remembering yourself and remembering who you truly are as a divine being, as a divinity within you, as a spark of the light from which you came. And I think when people have this experience and like they're like, wow, like what was I doing to myself? That's usually the expression people have that devastation with, like, why was I separate? Who taught me how to be separate? And that's where you go into some of the programming and where some of these things come from, right? Like there has to be some type of person or people who are in charge who want you to be separate. So you're devastating yourself from your own power and your own sovereignty and your own self-governing sense. And I think like it's a general conversation piece people should be having, right? Like if you look at the politics right now, like this is all distraction to keep us like just at each other's throats. So we don't realize this concept that we are connected to each other. Like you and I are one and the same. And it might be some hippy dippy shit, but speaking from like a firefighter sense, like we try to run away from all the hippy dippy shit as much as possible. And I try to do the best I can to explain to people like, no, man, like the moment you separate yourself is like the moment you're getting sick, and I think even in the firehouse, we have separation, and it's like these tribes trying to fight each other within our own department. Like I'm better than you. And that type of competitiveness like separates us,
Cancer is a cell that thought it was alone.
Mm-hmm.
So separation kills.
Good point. So I think that with what you're doing, I think there's a lot of information people to be informed. Like going back to the point where I said people are threatened by things they don't understand. So let's help them understand it. I think starting with what 343 Fund offers is a good start.
Yeah. So we offer, so say somebody comes and fills out a grant request to come through 343 Fund. They sign about a 36-page contract that basically lets me hold their feet to their fire on their own integration. So oftentimes we find when people come through this process, it gets a little bit gnarly when it's time to do the self-examination portion, and that's the part that people want to run from. And myself, having gone through psychedelic therapy, I know how uncomfortable that is. So I've put into place what I would need to stay. We give everybody a coach. They have the coach from the moment they join our organization until a year from the date of their psychedelic journey. The coach is accessible for pre-journey integration, kind of just framing out intentions and just really getting them ready to go on the journey. We put everybody in small groups then that go through together. We do pre-journey small group talks, so Zooms where people will see who they are, tell their story a little bit, just a little bit of an introduction. We also give them a breathwork coach. They get individual breathwork sessions one-on-one to prepare them with how to regulate their central nervous system. And we're given one thing by Creator when we're helplessly born, and it is our breath, and it is what's taken from us when we leave. And ironically, it is by the grace of the plants that we are able to live. So I always find that an interesting fact. So we teach them how to use that, especially because first responders love control and chaos, and a psychedelic journey is a chaotic environment. So I teach them about the breath. When they go to the service provider, they're also given breathwork sessions. So once they're familiar, it just helps them deepen that knowledge and education on that. Then we also do pre and post journey calls, depending on if you're before medicine or post medicine. Different nights of the week handle different calls. And we also have a spousal partner support group. We require that everybody that goes through has a journey buddy. That would usually be a spouse or a partner most commonly, or a parent, or a child, a best friend, somebody that if you don't pick up the phone when I try to call and get a hold of you, I'm going to call them. That person also helps them with any detox that they have to do. A lot of times these people have been plied with antidepressants and mood stabilizers for the majority of their life. So they'll have to come off of these things in order to go on these journeys. And that oftentimes is the most dangerous time. So we just make sure that they have not only their own doctor support with titration schedule, but also a journey buddy that can check on them daily. Then they have a peer support where they get somebody who's already gone through, that's another firefighter, police officer, EMT, and we kind of like match everybody based on who they are and what they're going through. And then we try to give them just a friend to call. It's not a coach. It's not, someone with 343. It's just someone who's gone through the program that they can reach out to. And then they have their individual small group that they journey with. We do a pre-journey dinner where I found when we would land in San Diego and then get ready to cross the border, it was a hurry up and wait that was just really uncomfortable. You're kind of looking around trying to suss out who else is going down to Ambio for Ibogaine in the hotel lobby. And it's just easier if you know who is. And then you can kind of just have a little bit more bonding time together. By the time they get in the car to go cross the border, everybody's nice and introduced to themselves. And then they start the process of kind of detoxing and preparing, hydrating, testing, and all of that once they get down to the service provider. Then post-journey, we also provide the same. We do Monday nights are mindfulness. It's kind of a yoga yin, just body scan, sound bath that we offer to everybody who's gone through our program. Saturdays is breath work. We give a breath work session from one of our breathwork facilitators. One of our breathwork facilitators is actually an FDNY firefighter too. So it's cool when we have people that are actually on the job, using the tools that they've learned and passing them on to other first responders. And then we get coaching reports. I get a report from the coaches every week. I look through to see if everybody's doing all right. If I see that somebody's having a struggle or a tough time or needs a coaching change or anything like that, then we all talk to each other within 343 about what's the best road for that individual participant. And then, of course, talk to that participant about what they need for support. So, most days of the week, we've got something going on where you can log into 343, whether it's an integration call, a breathwork session, or a mindfulness practice. We also supply everybody with an integration manual that's specifically catered to psychedelic journeys for first responders. Included in there are just different tools. Instead of alcohol, maybe you get an infrared sauna for detox. That's kind of my new thing. And you just kind of have little healthy ways to deal when, stress and traumas come back on. After you go through a psychedelic journey, it's kind of like you had the car detailed, but you're going to get back on the road and you you have to get the hose out at home every once in a while, and you got to clean it off because it's too expensive to go have all the seats taken out and have everything shampooed. And you need to be able to clean up the little messes in life and not pretend like, oh, I've done this psychedelic journey and now it's going to be sunshine and butterflies for the rest of the life. Like that's not how this goes. So you then have to learn what to put in place. And oftentimes, it's that container of support. My goal always with any first responder or anybody coming through my program is that you leave the program one day because you have your own self-supporting integration tools and you go off on your own. So you spoke earlier about generational healing, and they say that this medicine heals 7 generations back and 7 generations forward. And I truly believe that that's the work that we're doing.
Yeah, I think, like personal practices, I always preach on that. I think because it gives us an opportunity to reset the system and being in the body. I was a master at disassociation, and coming into the body is so helpful. And having some type of practice that just resets the nervous system as well is so efficient because it gives us an opportunity to take a break, number one, from the regular mundane things we do in life. And with personal practice, that's where clarity comes when you empty the mind out for a second, and it gives us, and you don't have to be like this Buddhist monk that's meditating for hours on end to have clarity, but you do have to let the mind filter out to get that clarity. So it doesn't have to be a meditation practice. There are other things like you were mentioning, like breath and things like yin yoga. It helps just silence for a second. And then that's where integration comes through, is when you're bringing the entirety of the whole into one unit, essentially. And, I think what integration for me is like striking the iron while it's hot. And so when you have this opportunity for integration, it's not like you don't do work. It's actually sometimes it's harder because you are given a roadmap of the answers, and now it's time to bring in application. And I think that's where wisdom comes through, is when we have application into our lives. And I do like just regular conscious work, so the just realizations I get just through having conscious realizations, I now have to apply them, or else what's the point? And I think one of my teachers had taught me, like, it starts with you. You start to work on yourself. And as you work on yourself, then you ripple out into your family, you're in your home. And then from there, now you ripple out to your immediate family or your family that you kind of talk to. And then from there, your work life or your friends. And then from there, the humanity. And so as integration starts taking its toll and how you have some type of traction in your life, you have this almost like this responsibility to incorporate like your traumas, your story to help other people. And that's really the bigger picture we're seeing here, is like, as the lights will find other lights, essentially. We will be this beacon of light, and you don't have to say anything. Someone can come to you and say, hey man, like, what's going on with you? You're acting different than what I've known you 10 years ago. Like, what are you doing that's different? I want that. And when you are emanating that, like, that's essentially your healing, because people see it in you without you saying any words. And like, I think integration is hard for people because like there's this expression, everyone wants to do ayahuasca, but no one wants to do the dishes, because it's like, okay, well, let's get our hands dirty now. Let's actually do what we were taught. And I think that can be really hard for people. I think I love how you're using like this community to like, they're able to have this thread with each other. And I think that's really important, because we heal through community. Like, we don't heal by ourselves. Like, we're designed to be this primal sense within us to be part of a community. And when we're cut from being part of a community. That's where isolation comes in, and that's where we feel like we're lost, And so when we help one another, it really brings things into perspective, and it brings this support, which I think is really important.
Yeah, they, we were talking about earlier, like the kitchen table for firefighters. Like cops don't have that, and
True.
when we're in these healing containers, it's like, they want it, they feed off of it, and the same thing during journeys. Like we have the kitchen table too during journeys, and that's kind of like where all the magic happens. So we kind of look at the 343 program as just one big kitchen table, and everybody's welcome there. The family, all of the family members are. And that's, where the magic happens, and that's where the normalization happens. And that's where the walls of judgment dissolve. And it's just so important that the people that have found healing through these modalities, that have exhausted all the rest, just keep using their voices no matter what. Like people all the time, think what they think, because I healed, and how I healed. But the further that matters to me, then the further along my healing progresses. A lot of times people come back from journeys and they'll say, oh, I want my wife to do this, or I want my brother, I want my sister. And to your point earlier, like the what you can do is just keep being, that healed version of yourself. And people are going to say, okay, I want that. And that's how you have to want it, and you have to put it into practice. The practice of meditation was one of the most frustrating practices that I've ever entered in my life. I remember being so pissed off about meditation. I watched the Heal documentary with Joe Dispenza.
Oh, it's a great documentary.
Yeah, it like saved my life. And I'm listening to him, and I was so mad at him because he's sitting there talking about how, I got hit by 60 miles an hour by a truck. And I told the doctors, no, I don't need that surgery. And I went home and I just meditated for 6 hours a day. And if I screwed up on my meditation, I started again from the top. And I listened to his story, and I just got so triggered and like angry by this man and his healing story. And I was like, this man's not Jesus. Like, if he can do this, I can do this. So I bought a book on how to meditate, and it was so ridiculous. It's trash. It's not how to meditate. But I remember reading that book and like going in there and just like trying to force my mind into submission. And it was like this Mr. Miyagi practice that I was doing with myself, being Daniel's son, like just trying to get past that immaturity that I held for this practice. And now when I go to meditate, it's like, I can drop into meditation, no problem, no matter where I am. But it took months of sitting with myself for 3 minutes to start, 5 minutes next time, 10 minutes, until I sat with myself, and, over an hour goes by and you don't even know you're there. So that's where the real magic happens. I oftentimes say I could be a prisoner in any cell, and because I have the ability to transmute my thoughts, I could never be trapped. And I think everybody has the ability to do that, and I hope we all find it in this lifetime.
Yeah, meditation's I think it's really difficult for firefighters and like first responders in general, because the hypervigilance is just, it's through the roof. And it's like this high functioning anxiety, like we're always thinking, like I was just like driving today, and I was like, dude, I'm always checking my mirrors, like kind of like way too much, but I'm trained to do that. You know what I mean? When I'm at work and I'm driving like a heavy apparatus, like I have to do that, but it was disturbing my peace in a sense, where I was like, okay, there has to be some type of balance here with that. But I think that's what is hard for first responders, is because of the hypervigilance, they can't shut off the mind. And when you do sit down for 5 minutes, you realize how much you think. And so it is like a muscle you got to practice using. And just like you're going to the
practice
gym.
Not using.
Right, exactly, right. But the muscle to shut it down. And like now I've been meditating for a few years now. It's where it's an anchor to my practice. But now I can just shut it off, with an intention. And it's crazy how that now affects my biology, because when I shut that off, my nervous system now can relax, and now my heart rate, I can drop my heart rate from like 70 to 50 just in that moment.
It'd be interesting. I bet if you hooked yourself up, you would see just at the thought of going to do that practice would already put yourself.
It's like a Pavlov response.
Totally, 100%. And we're so programmable. We're so trained. But one of my favorite ways, because first responders, maybe first responders are listening right now, and they're like, well, how the hell would you even start to practice shutting your mind off? And just box breathing is probably like the simplest way, because it actually gives you something to do. Breathing in for a 4 count, holding for a 4 count, out for a 4 count. And people do that, and without knowing it, they automatically are putting their central nervous system at ease, and they're shutting off their mind in a meditation. So if you don't know where to start, you can start with a simple 4 count box breath, and in 30 seconds, you've down-regulated your central nervous system. So you could do that after a fire, in a fire, anytime. So
yeah, I mean, it's hard sometimes. I still fail, and I think that I've had a lot of acceptance with that. Like, I'm not going to be regulated all the time, especially when I'm at work. Like, it was just interesting. I was blending 2 days of work that I had, and one day I just was regulating myself the entire day. Like, and it was a busy day, and the next day it wasn't busy, and I was dysregulated. I was like, what's going on? And there is this subconscious reaction to like getting a call or preemptively believing I was going to get a call. So like my nervous system was more dysregulated, which is really interesting. And so I played with those two ideas, like being really busy and then consciously regulating, or this other like reaction I was having to anticipating a call. It's really weird, right? But like in the end, I was like, okay, like there's still some work to be done here, and I can look at, first of all, my belief system that's supporting it, and then also like my attachment to my work life, And so I think it's tough for firefighters and going back into work after, someone has an experience, right? Like they go do a retreat, like Vipassana, like silent retreat, and then they go back to work. It's like, dude, how do you balance those two evils? You know what I mean? Or they go do an Ibogaine treatment, and then they come back to work. It's like, we work in the underworld, So like, how do we manage working in the underworld? And it is a sense of mastery with yourself, and also being compassionate with yourself too, because you're not going to get it all the time. And this comes from personal experience. Like, I was going downhill, and unless I pulled myself out of this hole I put myself in when I had my head injury, like no one else is going to do it for me. So that's how I started my meditative practice, is because I was like, dude, I have a brain injury, but there's also some type of lack of discipline with my mind. So that's something I could control. And I think when I started like taking full ownership for that, I started to kind of rectify and change and growth just by taking small steps. And I think just 5 minutes was where I started. It was 5 minutes of silence. See what happens. It was more a sense of curiosity rather than like punishment, Mm-hmm. But I think over time, like for people who are just barely starting, like, dude, just be compassionate with yourself. It start there, and that can actually turn into a meditative practice. Learn to be compassionate for 5 minutes with yourself.
Yeah, for some people, I was working with a first responder, a CAL FIRE guy actually, and he was just at the end of the day, this is a self-love journey. The healing journey is a self-love journey. And we're taught that like self-love is narcissism, from a very young age. And it's not, it's like the root to unconditional love and just forward progression as a human. So he was so uncomfortable with the self-love concept. And I told him for his meditation, just go look in the mirror every day and say, I love you, until doing that's not uncomfortable anymore, So
it's a pretty good practice.
Yeah. I mean, if that is triggering for you just to tell yourself, I love you, when you look at yourself in the eyes in the mirror, then it's something that you should face every day.
Mm.
So, yeah, I mean, something as simple as that. So it doesn't even have to, if you need to be doing something, come up with a mantra. Like this guy's mantra was peace, love, and joy. So, if you say something to yourself enough, you'll embody it. So, it just has to be that wanting to change. So,
Yeah, I mean that's the main thing is like the desire, that yearning for change. And I think we like to suffer subconsciously. We put that underneath it all. Like we think we have to suffer, and I think I've been hit with this recently, just on my own reflection with my own addiction to suffering. It's come to the point where it's so subtle now that I can see the subtleties in it, but I could just realize how much I want to suffer, thinking it's going to bring me closer to the divine. And I think that was an illusion I've placed in front of myself for a very long time. But now, just by having a realization for something, now the application has to come with it.
do you think that was like an attempt at control? Like if you choose to, or if you want to suffer, then you have some control in it, because we're going to suffer. It's not, you don't get to come here and not suffer. But is it if I choose when I suffer? I feel like for me, it was that, like, well, I'm selecting this suffering, so this will be the suffering I do. Where it's like, no, you don't know what suffering you're going to get hit with. And then what do you do when that, when the typhoon comes, what do you do for your cleanup effort? So that's where I oftentimes find myself. And then that's when I know if it worked or not, How am I reacting now versus how am I reacting then? One of the major changes that people get from Ibogaine is it seems that it turns their rage off. And I went, after my first time I journeyed with Ibogaine, I went to go get mad. And my physical body was doing what it was used to doing to prepare, and I could feel the separation, and it wouldn't come along. And I remember getting mad that I couldn't get mad, and then being like, oh my gosh, like the irony in all of this. And then saying, all right, that's something that's not going to be available to me anymore, because it literally just got stifled within me and my pattern couldn't return to it. So we hear that happens a lot with these plant medicines. So I feel like when you have something powerful like that, that's allowing you to pause and then choose the new road. But again, the person has to choose it. You go right back to the fire department, you're right back in, and it's not going to be a room with, chanting in the background. It's going to be the depths of hell. And then how are you reacting? What are you doing inside here when you're in the depths of hell? And that's the medicine, So.
Yeah, I mean, the power of choice is upon you. I think that having compassion when you don't make the right choice, is huge. And falling short, I think is a recognition we all have to face, because we're not going to always, we just have to be human. We're human beings, in this experience. And when we embrace our humanness, I think that helps. And because of the possible shame that can be attached when you do make a mistake. And I'm speaking for men worldwide. We have this affiliation with shame, and I don't know where that comes from. And I don't know what it is. Shame just, we feel like we have to be the alpha, we have to be this leader, and we have to embody those things. And when we don't meet these impossible expectations we place on ourselves, shame creeps up from underneath and just bulldozes you. And I think for me, my relationship with shame has been softened because of the compassion I've placed in front of it. And one thing that's really important to understand too is these medicines are heart-based medicines. And so they teach the authenticity of our hearts and how we're supposed to be guided by our heart. And particularly with the medicine of Iboga, it's going to mend the mind-heart connection. So there's this coherence that's happening that is blending those two major organs of our body that govern our life, essentially. And if one is not in balance with the other, then you're not going to be in somewhat of an aligned state. So when you have some type of assistance to bring those two into a mending state, now you can live your life in accordance with harmony, with balance, with structure. And that autonomy starts to really gratify itself. And the false self that's telling you all these lies and these things that you've really lived on with the foundation is going to go out the door. You're going to be like, that doesn't make any sense anymore because I live in my heart. And there's like this heart resonance that just exceeds the mind. And there's this intuitive sense that's there as well, but it's silent. It's really soft spoken. And so you really have to listen to get there. And so that's why when you do practices like you were mentioning for integration, you're now getting, you're learning to speak the language of the heart, finally, once again.
Yeah, it's that head-heart connection that we aren't, it's innate and it's a natural connection, but it doesn't come through the Western practices. You know, it's cultivated through that self-discovery journey. You know, you talked about the hero's journey at the beginning, and, you know, I couldn't help but think of like Joseph Campbell and, you know, that hero's journey that everybody's really, at the end of the day, that's what we're on. And you could ignore it your whole life, you know, but I feel like we're at a pivotal point with this generation where we have the ability to choose if we want to delve into that or if we want to stay asleep. And a lot of us are jumping in the pool.
I think you really do have to jump in. That's the only option. You know, it's kind of crazy. I had a friend who did an Iboga journey, and he was telling me like the medicine had told him that this is not the first human existence. And the reason why the medicine chose to leave Africa was because the planet will reset itself if humanity doesn't figure it out. And so these medicines will now make an effort to have people make that choice and do that full plunge, you know, to make change of the self, to heal the self. And when he told me that, I was like, whoa, that's kind of crazy, you know, because like there's information and wisdom that comes from the teaching of an experience, you know, that's beyond what you can give yourself. And I think that's what some of the assistance is. It's kind of like harboring real truth. And I know from what other Iboga practitioners I've spoken to, they say like Iboga heals with truth and love. And if we can face ourselves with the truth and love ourselves despite the mistakes we've made in our life and the things that were out of our control, you know, these are catalysts to lead us to a new beginning. You know, it's not the end. And sometimes we've put some meaning to it, thinking it was the end, and it wasn't. It was actually just pulling you by the leash, like, hey, let's have some type of growth here. Let's have some type of transformation. And I think over time, like we get so sucked into the meaning we put behind things that now we've created a story, and that story has now created a large chapter in your life. And now these medicines give you an opportunity to close a chapter. Now let's begin to another part of your life. And I think that can be really profound for some people when you get an opportunity to just finally seal the deal and move forward, you know?
Oh, for sure. It's like the opportunity for non-attachment, which at the end of the day, like that is the practice of being alive, is how well can we practice non-attachment. And these medicines and these different practices allow us to not only practice things that we're terrified of. Like if you think of something like a substance like 5-MeO-DMT, you can practice dying, which is super helpful if you're fearing death. It can absolve that fear from you, which allows you to lead a more free life. So, yeah, just practice of non-attachment and realizing that like we really are just here to play. We're gonna have everything happen to us because we need the duality of the life experience and we have free will, but we're here to have a good time, and all this crap gets in the way. And at the end of the day, yeah, if I can be here and ease myself through with just using something like my breath, and if I can talk to God without having to walk inside four walls of a church, if I can do it just within the walls, leaving the walls of my mind, then I think it would be a disservice to myself and to humanity to not grasp forward on that path and teach others how to access that. So conversations like this are so important, and the practices that we spoke about, and just the choice, is this the right way? I don't know, the way other people are, there's no right or wrong. Everybody's on a different road going to the same location. We're all invited to the same party. And yeah, I just prefer to do my party without being addicted to substances that are killing my body.
Yeah, you were talking about Adderall, and I always call Adderall government issued meth.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Because you can just go get a prescription for it, right? But I know I was on Adderall when I was younger, and I think it fried my nervous system since I was younger, and I think at some point I was like, dude, I don't like this anymore, so I got rid of it. I think but it left an imprint on my nervous system to where it definitely did some damage, and I truly believe ADHD is a gift, and I don't believe that it's a diagnosis, and we like to identify with diagnosis so much that we get wrapped up in it. And for me, I think it was I'm hypersensitive to my surroundings, and when I started seeing that as being a gift, I started realizing this gift is actually more psychic in nature, to where I can read things without words, specifically people's fields, their energy fields, or their Chinese medicine. They call it the Jing Shen, which carries information. And so some people will walk up to me and I can read their information immediately without words. It's crazy. But I've been able to cultivate my skill set with that, and it was not ADHD the entire time. It was I just multitask, and it was a gift that's been given to me since birth.
Yeah, but you don't fit in the chair at school when you act like that.
Oh,
so.
I was always in trouble. I was always in trouble, and getting taken to a doctor and saying, oh, I can't pay attention in school and all these other things. It's because school was boring, and because I didn't have to listen to the teacher. I could just get a B+ average and not have to pay attention. I was a distraction to other kids. I think that was the problem. But
well, it's interesting because our traditional school systems, where it's to make rule followers, people that fit in the box. I am like you. I had dyslexia, ADHD, and I didn't fit in a traditional school system. To this day, I've never graduated from college, but somehow I'm the CEO of 4 companies. So it's just it doesn't really, matter how you get there, but it does matter if your kids are on meth
right.
when they're getting there. I remember my son told me that the 2 most prescribed things, he went to Cornell University, and it was the 2 A's, Adderall and antibiotics.
Ooh.
That's what they're plying our kids with at college. But everybody's got to find their own road, right? I took a lot of Adderall before I didn't, and it was part of my process. There's so much shame, though. You were speaking about shame earlier, and when you're breaking free of addiction and stuff like that, and you go back and you said that most. Who was it? Bam Margera said that most people.
Oh, Steve-O.
Or Steve-O, that you don't even admit you're an alcoholic until you're through that till you've already stopped drinking.
Mm.
And when you are rooted in shame, it really holds your ankles and your healing. So I started just reframing it with people, and they would just have all this shame, especially first responders, around alcohol addiction. Because I like to say, they call it spirits.
Right.
It's like it definitely allows different things to embody you, and it's so bad for your system. But if it wasn't for alcohol, if it wasn't for cocaine, if it wasn't for Adderall, like the 343 fund wouldn't even exist, because I wouldn't even be here in this chair to tell this story. Like those substances, yes, are they good for me? No. Are there better ways? Are there better tools? Yes, they're in my integration manual now. But my tools for survival were cocaine and alcohol and Adderall, and it helped me survive through a very dark time. So I think there's a lot of freedom that can be had and healing through the acknowledgement of what got you here, whether it be, whatever, sugar addiction and alcohol addiction, like whatever, all of the bad is dualistic to transmuting to the good. So yeah, that's just can help somebody kind of let go of that story of shame and kind of reframe it to a story of empowerment, really. So I also save a lot of money not doing cocaine.
Yeah. When I was in paramedic school, there was this kid who would snort his Adderall.
Oh, I did that
crazy.
too.
I was like, dude, why would you snort it?
Oh,
dude?
because I work so much faster. Yeah.
I was like, man, like,
If you're not snorting Adderall, I don't even really want to talk to you.
yeah. And for me, Haley and I, we did our healing journey together, and Cambo is what saved us from our addictions. I was talking about my relationship with alcohol, and with her, it was cocaine. And, it rescued us. I have utmost respect for Cambo because it saved me. And that's why I serve Cambo.
How did you find it?
Oh my God. It was really an accident. It wasn't an accident, but I always call it an accident. Haley was doing it already. She said that she was going through yoga teacher training. And
It always starts with yoga.
yeah, right.
Yoga's the true gateway
I
drug.
know, it really is. So she was doing her yoga teacher training, and her teacher was doing Cambo already. And she was telling her, hey, you're coming with me tomorrow. And she's like, doing what? She's like, we're going to do Cambo. And like, she explained it to her, and she's like, I'm not going to do it. She's like, you're coming. And so they did it. And then she continued to do Cambo, and I had gotten my head injury at the time. And so I was struggling, like just utmost struggle bus. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do Cambo. I'm not going to do it, until it came down to like the utmost, like darkest hole I could ever be in my entire life. Like it was just, I was going to commit suicide. And I kept having these panic attacks. I never had a panic attack in my life. My nervous system was so dysregulated, and I was still drinking at the time. And I was realizing that drinking was causing more problems for my head injury and my nervous system stuff. So I ended up going, and it started to reverse my symptoms. And I did it a bunch. Like it wasn't just like, oh, I did one Cambo session.
Like, what was
continuous.
what was your protocol like back when you were like using it deeply for your healing?
I was doing it at least once a month, if not twice a month. And the first time I did it, I actually sat next to an 8-year-old boy who was doing it with me
Where were you?
at someone's house.
In America?
Yeah.
In the States?
Yeah.
Jeez.
So when I first did it, I was afraid I was going to shit my pants. And that was like the number one thing that I was like thinking of. And
Did you?
I did not. I did not shit my pants. But I had this little boy next to me, and I was like, okay, this little guy can do it. I can do it. And
You're saying this right now, and it's probably like freaking people out. Like, oh my God, an 8-year-old boy, especially if somebody knows what Cambo is. But in the jungle, the kids come up to their moms and say when they're sick and not feeling good, and they ask for Cambo.
Right.
So this isn't something that would harm a child. So.
Right.
And what is Cambo? It's peptides. It's peptides that are put. I mean, I'm sure your listeners know. You probably talk about it a lot.
yeah,
But yeah, that you burn and put on your body. So that's all the rage right now anyway, isn't it?
I know. Right? Yeah. I mean, the neurological peptides had rewired my whole system, you know, and I had no desire for any substance.
How many months do you think it took for you to get to that point?
I think I did. I definitely did like a series of a lot of Cambo, because I was really struggling. So maybe like 4 months to where like complete desire to not do it at all. Specifically alcohol. But I'll still have a drink here and there,
Same.
Yeah, but it's not like.
But I can have a drink and I don't want any more.
Right.
And I'm fine. And that's the first time in my life I've ever had that kind of power over alcohol. I always say when people say, well, how much Cambo do you have to do? And I always say, you have to do so much that you don't know how much you've done.
Yeah. You got to, because there's some underlying emotional stuff going on too. And Cambo can take you there, to that understanding with yourself. And,
it's a great practice for surrender, especially to clear off like pre-psychedelic journey. I love sitting with Cambo. Like if I'm going to go in for ayahuasca, like I'm going to clear off with Cambo. Not only does it just clear the energy out, it gets like parasites out. It's intelligent medicine, much like your inner cannabinoid system. Like Cambo goes where it needs to go in your body and it targets that. It's also been shown there's a study out there somewhere that's shown it to kill cancer cells. Yeah. So it's, the jungle medicine, it's the difficult one. There's no psychoactive properties to it. Although I have had a pretty, I don't know, almost psychedelic style journey, introspectively journeying with Cambo. But I would say it takes a lot of practice with that medicine to be able to navigate it from... It doesn't happen day one, but it is a great teacher of trust of your body. It's a great teacher to absolve fear. And it's a great place to go if you've exhausted all other Western medicine options. And it's legal to practice within the walls of the United States. So,
yeah, I mean, I have this book here. It's called The Cambo Iboga Ayahuasca.
I have that book.
Yeah, so like...
You and I have a similar library.
Yeah, so that, they refer to it as an entheogen, so it's accessing information in the field you aren't aware of, but it'll deliver it to you some way. You kind of, in Cambo, you kind of got to reach for it, for you to get it.
It was the first medicine I saw it with after my husband died.
Oh, really?
I just immediately knew I needed it. And I'm always like a little bit fearful when I'm going to it because I'm like, oh, what's going to happen now?
Right.
Am I going to get a double rainbow today? Like, what are we doing? But I just cried. It was like, it gave me like the biggest hug. And I just wept. And I was super aware of its like loving kindness to me in that moment. And it's like one of those things that I'll always be able to think about in my mind and go right back to the peace that it gave me. Now that said, it's rocked my world when it's not giving me some peace. In other journeys where I thought, well, this is it. This is how I go. But the funny thing that I like about it, I'll be in my mind when I'm in it and think, oh, I really screwed myself over. My whole day's ruined. I'm not going to be able to do anything. Right. And 10 minutes later, I'll be outside riding my bike, and I'll be like, oh, I'm so dramatic. But yeah. Yeah.
I had this one moment where I did a 3x3 of Cambo, and it was the first time I had like screamed and cried at the same time, because the wounding I had with my mother, I never let it go. And I was so stubborn with it. And I finally let it go, but it was like this just roaring cry. And I was stuck to the point where I was resisting trying to cry. And the woman who was serving me, she just like blew this hape up my nose.
Yeah, that'll do it.
And she gave me like this heart-opening hape, and that's what did it.
Did you get Bobansana?
No, this was, I don't remember what hape she gave me, but she gave me a specific hape. And it wasn't a hape to purge. It was a hape to break down these walls I put around my heart. And I asked her afterwards, I was like, hey, why did you give me that specific hape? And she's like, because you like to punish yourself. And it's not about punishing yourself. It's about surrendering to your heart. And I never forget that moment when she had explained that. And after I remember laying there and this song by Tina Turner came on, and it was like really about like letting go of revenge and how you can let go of anger, and these things they can be great teachers if you give yourself the ability to feel them, which is really what hit me. I was avoiding feeling something because the hurt was so deep, and I'll never forget that moment. You know, it was really powerful. But I think with the surrender thing, like with when you talk to a firefighter about surrender, they will never surrender. You know, they have a hard time with it, but it's a moment to transform, because you get to let go of the past. You get to let go of the constructs you've placed upon your own self, other people, these expectations on life. And when you surrender all of that, there is a moment to have a new beginning within the self, you know.
You know, you just said that a firefighter will never surrender. And I remember one time I asked my husband, I said, you know, knowing everything that you know about 9/11, if that happened again, would you go into the building? And he paused, you know, for a second. And then he looked at me and he said, I hope you could forgive me. And, you know, it was just quiet. And he said, does that make you mad? And I said, no, it makes me really proud. You're a really good firefighter. And I hope that what you said, you know, is true of every first responder. And I think that that's like the unique thing about them that separates them from the rest of society. But there's a beautiful thing that can be done, and you've done it. You know, you're a firefighter who just said they'll never surrender, and you've surrendered greatly to yourself. And watching these medicines allow people to surrender, not to the fire, but to their fire, has just been one of the greatest gifts. And I hope I get to witness it for the rest of my days. So,
yeah, I mean, we're at a lot of risk with our jobs, you know, and I think we're realizing it even more now as we're dealing with lithium batteries, because firefighters now can go into a fire and breathe in just a plume of smoke and completely ruin your career. You can never breathe the same again based off breathing any of that stuff. So I think there's much more hesitancy with how much we risk, because what are we risking it for? Some stupid car fire that has a lithium battery? You know, just surround and contain it. That's the most we can do now. But it's scaring people, you know, with what we risk. And we don't realize how much we risk prior, because the carcinogens that have been seeping under our gear have been like the silent killer for a very long time. So I think people are now waking up to what do we really risk, and at what cost? You know, like am I going into work and earning some type of street cred with my crew, you know, because I'm a badass? But like, what at what cost? Why does that have to be detrimental to my health? You know, it's tough. It's a really hard one for people to swallow right now.
you know, for firefighters, a really easy way to handle what you're speaking about. There was a study done after 9/11, and they put infrared saunas down at some church right across the street from the site. And some organization gave firefighters access to that, and, you know, contingent on following them on this study. And every firefighter that used the infrared sauna as detox before they left the site fared better from a carcinogenic perspective. So we actually, for that, and because of what you're saying, we actually put saunas in most of the FDNY rescue houses. 343 did.
Oh, cool.
So that they can do the contrast therapy and start removing some of those toxins, because the job doesn't even think about that. You guys don't even get your bunker gear cleaned, you know, like you don't even get washing machines to deal with the toxins. And, you know, you're not machines, you know, you're men and women, and all of that's going into you and adding to your toxic load. And I think it's why we're having this conversation, because these substances like, well, bee venom therapy and Cambo, and I just watched an Ibogaine journey from this police officer who had a TBI. He brought his CPAP machine down and was on it for years, didn't have open airways. And after his Ibogaine journey, he didn't need a CPAP machine. And that was last Wednesday. So he hasn't, I mean, to come off of that and be able to breathe again, there is repair available for us. And cancer is not a death sentence. It's a lonely cell. And the more we have community and remind everybody that they're not alone, the less cancer we're going to have. And the more freedom for you guys to give your lives back together. I think there's an average of 5 years of life post-retirement for a first responder.
Totally.
Yeah. So, with organizations like mine, the 343 Fund, my goal is to bankrupt the pension system. You guys live so long. So.
Yeah, that's been one of the things is there's a lot of, very shallow retirements when you finally reach the gates
get this
of
pension.
The pension and the retirement. What worth does it have now?
Yeah.
There's not much there.
No, you just basically saved for the pension system,
Yeah.
So, I want you guys to save and invest for your futures. I mean, what first responders give to us as a society is priceless. And then the way they're treated. I mean, we just last week had somebody picking firefighters off after setting a fire. I mean, it's unacceptable the way our society treats first responders. And you guys deserve to be given the freedom from the traumas that you have ingested for all of us. And that's what 343 Fund is for. Yeah,
I think there's a paradigm shift happening. A lot of firefighters, first responders, veterans, they're afraid to go do treatment like this because they think they're going to get fired for doing some type of mind-altering substance. But I've talked to my behavioral health director, and we're pushing something different. An adjunct insurance company to send someone to go do legal psilocybin or ketamine treatments. And, he's open to it because it's not a matter of if, but when this is going to happen because of the epidemic of cognitive disease that's happening and the epidemic of chronic pain that's happening, the underlying brain trauma that people are not realizing they've had for 10 plus years that's been affecting their behavioral disorders. These medicines are facilitating the complete reset of those problems in a short amount of time to where now they can have their life back. And people have been white knuckling chronic pain. They've been white knuckling a disorder, for so long. And then they have these, what we call golden handcuffs against the administration that may fire you for doing something like this. That's the fear around it. There's a fear-based belief around this sequence of wanting healing, but those golden handcuffs keep people locked in because they got kids at home and
they've got this pension they can't lose.
The pension.
The pension. It's so funny though. The golden handcuffs, they're not really there. They're not real. There's no drug test that's going to take you down for this. So, they're not going to come back and test you for Ibogaine. It's not happening. I asked a cop once, what about the moral injury portion of this? You arrest people for this and now you're going to go heal. And he said, if I get off this train, the train's going to keep going and they're not even going to notice. But I'm not going to be alive to collect my pension if I don't go do this. So, we've had people on FBI task force go. We've had them get questioned afterwards. They've just said I went to a clinic in Tijuana. What clinic? Ambio Life Sciences. And it's not happening. I dare a department to take one of my people down for doing this because there will be a army of people ready to fall on this sword. So
I kind of hope that an agency does do something because I want I want the awareness to kind of to come out. It's already coming out, like with.
Do you know how quick the GoFundMe would be? And the person would have their whole pension covered. So no. And to be honest with you, that's why no department's doing anything. This right now is this is a bipartisan issue, because we're talking about the progression of a healthy society, but everything's a political issue. But right now, this is a hot issue. We're getting a lot of advancement, through RFK's movement and through, the congressmen and congresswomen that have been brave enough to fall on the sword. One of the huge advocate that I mentioned before is Governor Rick Perry. He's making Ibogaine his life mission. And again, this isn't a drug. This is an alkaloid, and it's a medicine, and we should be allowed to have medical access to medicine in this country. So I am super optimistic for the change, and I'm very excited for a department to come after someone as well, so that we can finally rip the Band-Aid off of this thing. But I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, for my department is massive. We have 104 fire stations, over 4,000 members, and we have been dealing with such a crisis in our department the last few years with addiction issues, with suicides, and with just out of touch realistic behaviors, like stuff like just why are people doing this shit? It's
I
just
think they said NYPD had like 7 or 9 suicides so far this year, which is
that's
crazy.
insane.
Yeah.
So it's a crisis, right? Yeah. And they really don't know what to do. They don't have any answers. They have they're trying to do something. They're trying to put more
They don't
awareness.
have any answers. They don't have any answers. They're trying to look like they're doing something.
So that's the thing. That's the facade, is that they will legally feel obligated to post something on, we have this portal, right? Everyone looks at the department website and new information is put up. And so they will just put something on there by the department psychologist to make it seem like they're doing something. But in reality, is anything getting done, And for me, I've been more involved the last 3 years in peer support. And so peer support's great. You get to call some person who knows, has a cultural competency of what you may be dealing with, the stuff going on at home, whatever. That's great. And we do have some talented people who do want change, but the magnitude of the crisis that's involved needs something bigger. And I think that this is it. With Rick Perry, and what's it, Brian Hubbard? No. Yeah, Brian Hubbard.
Greg Abbott is who has signed is the Texas governor who signed the Texas Ibogaine initiative. They've also just had Ibogaine movement in Ohio last week. We are anticipating 6 to 8 states by the end of this year. And Brian Hubbard is leading this movement with his voice. He started with the Kentucky Ibogaine initiative, and that really fell apart. And when you backtrack through why that would have fallen apart, you eventually end up seeing a money trail from Big Pharma to the politicians there that crumbled the Kentucky initiative. So we're having the same kind of cancer moving through today with our politicians. And until we as citizens start individually calling out these politicians, and I think it's time to get the pitchforks. Yeah. And we need to make sure that we make it real uncomfortable to take a payout from Big Pharma going forward.
Yeah. So if anyone gets a chance, you got to listen to this Joe Rogan episode with Rick Perry and Brian Hubbard.
Yeah. I've listened to it.
I listened to it, and well, first of all, I was like, who is this guy who looks just like Zach Galifianakis, who's got this preacher accent from Kentucky speaking. I didn't watch the video, but when I saw the video, I was like, what the hell? This guy looks like just like Zach Galifianakis. But when I heard him talk, he has this this story he tells about his wife.
Joe Alice.
And I was like, I got so emotional hearing, I'm getting emotional now hearing his wife's story, because it just had a very direct parallel relationship with my mom, and just the struggle with pharmaceutical medications. It was really powerful. And he has just like this way of speaking that just grabs you, you know, and he's so passionate about it because he experienced this experience with the divine as this unification with himself. And if you ever get a chance, man, it is a really powerful episode. And the fact that they talk about all the veterans that have been doing this on their own volition and taking things into their own hands because they are not supported by our U.S. government, and showing, you know, these politicians, hey, this is what's going on, you know, and this is the healing we're getting. There has to be something for this. There has to be some type of paradigm shift, because this is hope. And when we find hope, we can kind of hold that and use it for our own advantage. But it has to be like a legion of us that come together and speak up about it. You know, I've heard many, many transformational stories from a lot of different people, friends of mine, and the complete turnaround of these people, it's insane. I mean, there's the percentage, I would say it'd be like 90 percentile.
Yeah,
know?
it's a super. I mean, it's an and a point of argument for the percentage, you know, but it's a lot higher than 6 to 7%. I'm going to tell you that right now, and the transformations within the walls of Ibogaine is so common, and just. It's like a Tuesday, you know, I'll sit there and I'll be like, oh my God, this guy's off of his CPAP machine, you know, or this guy doesn't have to use his cane anymore. You know, I'm just like totally mind blown. And the staff at Ambio is like, oh yeah. You know, like it's so common to see a miracle there that it's just the truth of what goes on when you commune with this medicine. Now, does it work for everyone? No. And there are some people that don't want it to work. And if you don't want it to work, it won't work. So you're talking about it's a you versus you kind of thing, that the medicine's kind of a guide, and it's you and God, you know, but it's you versus you. And sometimes you can't get out of your own way. And I have seen people and their refusal to get out of their own way. And I think the most important part for anybody in the space that's trying to help anybody is to let them stay. So not everybody's going to come along, and this isn't going to work for everyone. But if you want to free yourself from your physical or mental turmoil and addiction, you've got a really good chance if you can get yourself on some Ibogaine, your hands on some Ibogaine. Now, there's a small percentage of the population of the world that's even privy to this medicine for several reasons. One is it's not allowed legally in the United States and in many countries. And the second reason is because it's expensive. But when I got hit in the head with that tree, I didn't even have anything happen to me. I got to the hospital, and I was one of those patients that ripped everything off of me and refused to be treated. And I got a bill for like tens of thousands of dollars, if not like $100,000 something dollars. You know, that was insane.
Right.
For $10,000, you can go have a fully integrative, supportive experience with the medicine at a clinic in Tijuana, Mexico. So, and I got to tell you, the medical care in Mexico, you know, we're so busy being better than everybody else up here in the States. The medical care in Mexico puts our medical system absolutely to shame. So I would rather be in a Mexican hospital any day of the week right now.
So I know you've been big on, if you want to help support someone, I know you've talked about it. So if you mind talking a little bit about how you can help support and sponsor someone through 343, and then also kind of give some more information, because we're closing up here on like if someone is interested and so forth.
So the best way would be to go to the 343fund.org you can fill out a grant application if you need help, or you can click to donate. We have a really good program right now that's the 343 program, and you can sign up to give $3.43 a week. So it's like the price of a cup of coffee to a first responder. You could give $3.43 a month, whatever. But for less than $12 a month, you can help send a first responder to get treatment for all these conditions and more. The unique thing about our organization is right now to date, and all from the fruition of our organization, 99% of every dollar received goes directly back out to support a first responder in their journey. And not many not-for-profits can say that. We are a 501c3, so your your donation is fully tax deductible. And yeah, every dollar we get in sends a first responder. We've spent over probably right around 140, 150 first responders to date. My goal is to send 1,500 first responders a year for treatment. So we have lofty goals, and we need lots of help and support. But also being able to do just $3.43 a week or a month or whatever is also something that's attainable for a first responder to do. Because a lot of times, I was married to a first responder. We lived paycheck to paycheck. I mean, we had a few $1,000s in the savings account, but it was nothing, monumental. And so a lot of times it feels like only the rich can help. But this is a way where just an individual first responder can literally help send another first responder heal. We talk about putting your arm in the hole once you get out in our organization, and that's the only way for this to work.
All right. Well, Angela, thank you so much for talking and sharing what you offer and all your knowledge and your story. It's really powerful. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you everyone for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, grab lives, and it could help get this information out and help people, especially our first responders, the people who serve this country, veterans, police officers, and so forth. So thank you everyone for listening. I love you. Take care.
It's time for Crab Lives.